Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Art of Becoming Unstuck. This podcast show is designed to help you achieve emotional well-being. I am your host, Arda, along with Rise to Realize life coaches Elizabeth Ouellette, Beth Heron, and John Sujarit. Today, in this episode, we will be exploring forgiveness. We're going to define what forgiveness is, and we're going to explore ways of how to forgive and how to be forgiven, and what it is, and what kind of impact it has on our emotional and mental well-being. So let's start with Elizabeth. Elizabeth, can you maybe give us a little bit from your perspective what forgiveness means?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say that forgiveness is letting go of resentment, letting go of vengeance toward a person you feel has harmed you in some way, whether that person deserves forgiveness or not. And I think that oftentimes we think that forgiveness is letting go of all the feelings and everything's okay. I don't think that's what it's about, because I think you can forgive someone and discharge all those feelings, but you may still have trust issues. Like they're two different things. Like forgiveness doesn't mean, oh, I love you and this is great. It's more of a discharging those feelings, neutralizing them, and then saying, okay, we're good, but the relationship doesn't have to go back to the way it was, or it could, or that's open-ended.
So what I'm hearing is that it's a little bit of letting go of somebody's
Anger.
the anger and resentment. Beth, what is it for you? What forgiveness means? Is it letting go as well, or do you have another perspective?
Yeah, it definitely is letting go, and perhaps in some way, shape, or form, it's maybe looking at the situation in a different way. And I had, when we had talked about this topic earlier, I also feel like part of forgiveness is like sometimes we feel like it's for the other person, like we're doing that other person a favor, perhaps by forgiving them. And I'd like to sort of for us to think about it in a different way, as if we're doing something for ourselves, like that, almost like we're the beneficiaries of forgiving somebody else.
So if we are letting go something from our own system, from our own psyche, that is beneficial to the person who forgives, because you are basically offloading that burden.
Right. And yeah, I think if we hang on and we don't forgive, perhaps we're internalizing the anger, the resentment, the pain, the trauma, right? And that's not a healthy place for us to be. So I think there's I don't know, maybe it's cathartic. It's like to go through that process of forgiving another individual, even though I'm not saying it's easy.
Yeah, that's a good question. That's a good comment, Beth. Like, it's not easy. How do you forgive someone? How do you do it? Say something really traumatic happens, like say, I don't know, this has never happened to me, but let's say someone let my indoor cat out and it got hit. I don't know if I could ever forgive that person. I don't know. And
or even I had a situation which, gratefully didn't turn out as tragic as it could have, but my husband and my son, when he was much younger, were riding bikes, and my son, I think he was 8 at the time, had a horrible accident. His front 2 teeth were like knocked out. He comes home like bloodied, and I really had to dig deep to say, okay, I'm not going to blame my husband for having this happen, and thank goodness this child, like, what if he, I don't know, just the what ifs sort of come through. But
yeah,
it's like I don't know, is there a compassion? Do you guys feel like there's a compassion component to this?
Maybe there's a compassion, maybe there's some deeper understanding, but I want to also hear from Jon about this blame and letting go the blame, and also letting go this heaviness that somebody carries because of that, maybe anger, resentment. Jon, do you have, can you relate to that? Blame and letting go the blame?
Yeah, I mean, I think I can relate to it both on, I mean, I guess on a family level, right? There's obviously a lot of, resentment I might have towards my parents in terms of what they did growing up. And then, at least for me, I I always thought like, okay, it was they were doing this, like these things were done intentionally. But once I started to peel back and get more curious and learn, like, oh, okay, there's other reasons why they were doing things the way they did. They only had tools, parenting tools that were available to them. I guess logically, I was like, how can I blame someone if if they didn't intentionally do it? And just kind of like with other scenarios, with if someone let my dog out the door and the dog got hit and all that, for me, it would come back to like, did the person, were they intentional or not? And most of the time, I think I find that the things that are happening where you're in a situation to blame or forgive is that it's truly not intentional, and that there were other reasons outside that person's control. So then it's like the blame keeps being passed down, and eventually where does it end, right?
Yeah, exactly. Elizabeth, how do you determine whether somebody's intentional or not?
It's a good question. Jon, so I agree with you. Like with people I know, I can say, well, this is how they were raised, and these were their circumstances, and this is
Right.
what happened. Like, so for family situations, I can do that, right? But I just took, not to be morbid, but I just picked up the paper in Los Altos here, and a couple who had 2 children, twins, were hit by drivers doing race car dragging in a city nearby.
Yeah.
The kids are okay, the parents are dead. Now, those family members, so the kids are, how do you forgive that? Eventually, how do you forgive that? That's a tough one. I mean, because they were, so you could say, well, young, immature, not thinking that anything was going to happen. But when it gets personal like that, I don't know if I could forgive. And maybe I'm just not high on the consciousness scale.
It's not about the consciousness, but I think what we are talking about, just when we distill this down to the basic processing of emotions, is that maybe before forgiveness comes the processing of emotions. There's a lot of anger, I'm sure. There's so much sadness, so much grief, so much not accepting what happened, right? In that situation, in many situations that we face, something happens and it is not reversible. And most of us, somewhere, somehow, we hold grudges about our parents because we are not happy about our lives and the way we turn out to be, or we fail in certain situations and we are not so certain about ourselves in other events, in areas of life. So we blame the drivers, we blame the parents, we blame the neighbors, we blame the friends, we blame the teachers, we blame our spouses. So maybe before even we talk about forgiveness, and I don't want to, stay away, drive this away from forgiveness, because I think we want to talk about forgiveness, but it is processing that emotion and then letting go happens. And what is then forgiveness? What is remaining is for you to maybe put a little bow at on top of that gift, that release.
So
And yeah, that's
Arda,
forgiveness.
when
Yeah.
you talk about the blame and the resentment and the anger and whatever, so I mean, what is the benefit to the individual to hang on to all that?
There's not much benefit, right? It's just that the emotional, these are all repressed emotions that are coming from fears and coming from their own past trauma, their own repressed feelings. So they are hanging on to those emotions because they need that energy, they need that charge. and they carry that as a burden, as we all know. And that's why we are providing these incredible, you guys are providing these incredible life coaching sessions to release people from that burden. Forgiveness is one of the methods later on, once you process these emotions. Why am I angry? Why am I sad? Why am I grieving? Do I feel lonely? Do I feel unlucky? Do I feel unfortunate? Do I feel taken advantage of? Do I feel put down? Do I feel not good enough? Do I feel like a failure? So all of these are basically feelings fueling these emotions. And in the heat of those emotions, forgiveness is far away from us.
Can I just say something? I
Always.
feel very, very hypocritical right now because I'm like, oh, so in that scenario I just gave, now, I've texted and driven before. I've done stupid things in my car. I'm not perfect. I've done silly things with the cat and let them out. So why am I holding someone to a higher standard? I mean, it's kind of hypocritical of me to say, well, that happens. That person was careless, because I'm seeing myself in that person actually right now. Like, I'm not perfect.
Elizabeth, don't we at some point all have the potential to be that person? Maybe we're not.
Right.
I think, don't we all have that potential?
John, what do you think? I think so. What do you think?
No, I totally think so. And then also, you guys inspired me to kind of ask the question, kind of for all three of you, whoever wants to has an answer. Is like, you guys are helping me realize that we always talk about forgiveness as like a one-time event. Okay, hey, like in movies, do you forgive me? I have to decide yes or no right now. I think in society, we don't treat forgiveness as a journey, right? And forgiveness so if someone comes say, hey, do you forgive me? It's like, I'm still working on it. I feel like that should become the norm, because that actually means that you're actually kind of processing your emotions, right? Looking into really the fears that are behind how you're feeling. And then it's kind of looking inward, right? And so forgiveness, if we take off the pressure of it being something that you just have to do right then and there, I think that also is kind of good foundation towards overcoming it and forgiving, right? Just to know that it takes a journey and time and self-work.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a process. Absolutely. I think we are all agreeing, and I think sharing that with our listeners. It's a process. So it is not a forceful action to kind of let go or release certain, burdens. And the other thing is, on page 222 of the Art of Becoming Unstuck, the book, we talked about the forgiveness as being the basically releasing somebody from their responsibilities, from their obligations to meet our values, to meet our expectations. I mean, if we break it up, and I'm curious what you all are going to contribute to this discussion about this statement. In order to release someone from their responsibility, from their accountability, you need to understand them. In order to understand them, you need to understand yourself. So it becomes this two-way street, as Beth was saying about the kind of, hey, I need to forgive myself first. And if you are holding yourself accountable, it works that way as well. So what is my accountability? What is my responsibility? Can I give myself a pass on this? I think that is a process. Maybe we should call it, after John highlighted this, process of forgiveness. And sometimes you say, I don't know, maybe I heard it in my own life or in the movies, can you forgive me? I'm not there yet. Right? People are just processing. Let me just first process my anger. Then I understand why did you do that? And I think this is all in relationships. I'm sure everybody can relate to that question. Why did you do that? Because that's an attempt to understand someone. At the end, hopefully, understanding is so deep that you can release them from their responsibility, accountability to comply with our value system, with our thoughts, with our beliefs, with our expectations.
All right, is that why the words "I forgive you" are so powerful? It's because the person literally feels released of certain expectations that are energetically being held.
Yes, because the person, whether the person is aware of it or conscious of it or not, the person who committed the crime, quote unquote, the misbehavior and whatever, the wrongdoing and everything, they are deep down feeling guilty. Okay, so every relationship has a karmic interaction. Every relationship is a dance between two people. If somebody feels guilty, the other person feels the burden of it as well. So it's a very interesting, intricate thing. So one person understands the other person's intentions, wrongdoing, the reasons behind it, then forgives that person, then the other person is released and relieved as well. Great.
Okay, why I'm feeling triggered right now, John, with that and Arda, because you're like, what if I haven't asked for forgiveness and somebody goes, I forgive you for that? I'd be like, what do you mean? I wasn't asking forgiveness. No, seriously, what if somebody's like, that's happened, I forgive you for that? I'm like, I feel all triggered right now.
It's a great opportunity. It's a great opportunity.
Yeah, Elizabeth, can you say more? Can you give more details to an example?
No.
There's one person in my life, it happens a lot. It's like, I forgive you, John. It's like, what?
I'm like, what? I didn't ask.
Maybe
like,
it's the time to use an open-ended question. What did I do wrong?
Right.
Yeah. And the other thing is that's a
Or
great
you can
point.
say, I forgive you too.
Nice.
Now that we're talking about it.
Nice. So here's the thing. When that happens, did you feel that the person who forgave you was higher on a platform looking down on you and say, you know what, you are released from your accountability. You
Absolutely.
do not need to meet my expectations anymore. You can go away now.
Yeah, who do you think you are? I mean, absolutely.
But Elizabeth, back to what I said earlier, it's almost like they are fulfilling some need in themselves, right?
Right.
Because again, I think it goes back to sometimes there's a part of forgiveness that it's for ourselves and it makes
That's
us
right.
feel better. So,
Absolutely.
But also
100%.
it's better for your health anyway to forgive, because you're walking around with all this stress and all this anger, all this resentment.
That's exactly how I feel, Elizabeth. Dead on. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Poison.
It's like that. Let
Poison.
it go. Like all these other emotions that, we have to kind of let them go. It's not good for you to be like not forgiving people.
Well,
I'm actually,
Mhm.
John?
No, but then why is it that there are people who can hold a grudge at a 10 out of 10 level with the anger and the resentment for what it seems like their entire life, and whereas someone like us, I feel like it's so draining. It's more painful for me to hold on to it, that I rather just let it go because I'm choosing the less pain of, I rather feel slightly guilty, right? But
Good point.
why is it just like what's there behind that of being able to hold that grudge forever?
yeah, artists
Always.
think more that I feel like it has something to do with power. Like sometimes there's, even though it's maybe not a great energy, but that energy of anger or whatever, there's something about that makes that person feel powerful in some.
Do you think that person is playing a victim in that circumstance? Like really enjoying playing the victim, saying, I'm not going to forgive? Is it a victim thing?
Yeah. Arda, what is it?
Absolutely.
Victim power?
I think you're both right.
Exactly. Exactly. You nailed it because it is. So always think about these two levels, right? So when everybody were in that balanced level, looking eye to eye, nobody does anything wrong, nobody gets triggered, nobody has any emotional reaction to each other. So this is when everybody, 8 billion people are like this, there is peace in the world. Nobody's triggering anybody.
Mhm.
But because we have subconscious programming, because we have ego, we start to go up and down. So somebody doing somebody wrong, okay, the other person feels offended, so they go down. So the person who committed the offense is up. So this person gets triggered. Okay. So when this person triggered, what they're going to do is they're going to get emotionally charged, anger, sadness, frustration, anxiety, worry, all sorts of emotional charge, mostly anger if there's something going on. And they want to go up and bring this person down. So that is an attack. They're defending themselves. The first they feel victim, but then they want to be victor. So they try to attack the other person. So the other person gets offended, and then they go up and try to be the victim. So in that, it's all for grabs. The power is for grabs. So who is more powerful? But that is the ego power. That is trying to make you feel better. You're trying to be better than the other person. So in that case, when somebody has been done a wrongdoing, so the person is hanging on to that anger because that gives them the power to go against the other person so that they can put them down. So that is going on, as you guys described very well, but that's technically what's happening. And everybody's just attacking in each other's boundaries to make points to make the other person more vulnerable.
And so once an individual can and are able to release that, right? Say, I forgive you, and find that forgiveness in their heart, then all that sort of goes away. Like it sort of neutralizes it, right? There's no more victim, there's no more anger, there's no more it's sort of like all that just dissipates.
Exactly. At the same time, like Elizabeth was giving us this example, if somebody comes in, I forgive you, don't worry about it. If there's a tone, if the person feels higher than the other person to forgive without understanding where the other person is coming, the level is still not set at balance. So that's why first, I believe before we can forgive, we need to understand, and that's where the compassion comes. We want to be in the person's wrongdoers' shoes to understand where they're coming from. That's why it's such a high energy. If you use that as a kind of a more defensive, as a victim, oh, I forgive you, don't worry about it, that imbalances, breaks the equilibrium again. But in the real situation, when you understand and forgive someone, equalizes everything. Elizabeth, what do you think?
Well,
Does
I
that
was
make
just
sense?
thinking of, yeah, it does make sense. It makes a lot of sense. And, yeah.
Sorry, can I just interrupt for a second? Elizabeth,
Yeah.
do you think the person that's saying that to you sort of
Solicited?
unsolicited, thank you, do you think that is a forgiveness from their heart, or almost like a forgiveness that feels manipulative?
I can't say. It
Okay.
could be both,
Okay.
right?
That's a great question and answer, because we may not know when. I'm patiently waiting. When can we use the communication strategy we teach to our clients? Open-ended, curious question. When can we communicate, right? Before even we forgive, can we ask the other person what happened? Hey, I felt not good enough. I felt taken advantage of. I felt disgruntled. I felt put down. Whatever they made you feel. And then going to them, expressing what we feel, and then asking the open-ended question, what happened? Let me hear from your side. Because again, maybe you heard me say before, nobody wakes up and says, today I'm going to make my friend's day as hell. I'm going to go against my husband. I'm going to go against my wife, and I'm going to show them how awful it is to live with me. and I'm gonna just show them, right? Nobody wakes up, with these intentions. I don't believe so. I mean, if you know somebody, please tell me, and I will still disqualify as an exception. So it's just, I don't know anybody does that, but we do it. We do it all the time, every day. I'm sure when we are talking, a million people offended the other million spouses. I'm sure. So, but we don't understand because we don't communicate. I want to bring that back to that, and so curious what you guys think
Well,
about that.
I have something related, and I think it ties in. So recently I have a sister, I have a house somewhere else, and she forgot to lock the door, right? The apartment. Someone broke in, it's a college town, took a bunch of stuff, not real valuable, but like ransacked the place, right? To me, the stuff in there wasn't valuable. And at first I was upset that somebody had been in my place. I felt invaded, my property invaded. But honestly, how many times have I'm just a little OCD, so I shut the door and lock it. Then I open the door, then I shut the door and lock it again, then lock it again. So I do that like 20 times, right? So she doesn't, and I don't think she should. And so I said, you know what? She kept saying, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. I can't believe this has happened. I have to pay you back for all. And I really don't feel angry. So we got into the conversation is the biggest thing is I don't hold any grudges right now. And, in this one situation, I just don't. But it came down to her forgiving herself for doing it. And I thought that was a really important point. Forgiveness is, I can't do it. I can't,
Yeah.
And you, what made you not get angry with her? Because you felt, violated, your place got violated. It happened to me once, and I kind of feel it is yucky feeling somebody else walking, it is not your home, yes, but also it was your property. So what made you not get angry? What was going on through your head? It's just like all of a sudden you accept it. And by the way, that is back to Beth, like it is the acceptance, understanding and accepting equalizes those power struggles always. So Elizabeth, what was that made you accept the situation?
Number one, I'm not better. I could have forgotten to lock the door. Number two, anybody could break in that apartment anytime. There's no one living there at the bottom floor. They could smash a window, and I've been broken into before, and I had nothing to do with my sister letting the door unlocked. And I don't keep anything valuable there just for that reason. It happens.
Beautiful. Do you see, I mean, I'm looking for your feedback, like how this incredible understanding brings this acceptance, and all of a sudden, even the need to forgive disappears.
Yeah.
Interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
And
Because it could have happened to me. I could have done the same thing.
Yeah. Jon?
And I guess not to get too deep, and I'm not avoiding your question about the open-ended questions, but is it possible to forgive because of your own, if you're such a people pleaser and you would never want to feel that guilty, on the other hand, that you forgive because you wouldn't want that person to suffer the guilt that you don't want to suffer from, you know what I mean? So it's like, yeah, I mean, they left the door unlocked, but man, if I did that, I would feel so guilty and torture myself that I don't want that person to go through even 1% of that guilt. So boom, whatever happens in your body, you just forget about it.
That is an interesting perspective, because as a people pleaser, you are basically already in their shoes. Obviously, you're understanding them, you have compassion for them, and that turns into forgiveness. And then the counter argument would be, where is your value? Sometimes you don't need to forgive people and claim not claim, but ask for some explanation. This happened. Okay. Before I forgive you, I like to understand what happened, sir.
I love that.
it is kind of, it's a tricky, right? Back to this power. If you feel victim and all of a sudden you feel their pain, and then you want to take away their pain because that is your coping mechanism with emotional pain, obviously you can actually grant forgiveness very generously.
Yeah.
The other thing is I can't go into, and maybe this is selfish, John, but I can't go like, I can't make that other person feel better. As long as I've said I have no ill will towards you. Like, it's not a problem. I get it. But then the more somebody goes, oh, I apologize. What can I do? And then I start feeling annoyed. I'm just like, dude, this is your problem. Almost at the end. But I don't think that's a great way of handling it either.
But I'm going to bring it back to the open-ended, curious question in terms of the communicating. How can I make you process your guilt? Or what do you feel in this position? Or I notice that you keep repeating, and it seems like there is something that you're hanging on here. What is it that can you share more of what is happening? Right?
Yeah.
That way we're opening the communication.
Yeah.
That way we are actually talking.
And maybe I am annoyed. Maybe I'm just like, oh my God, so I'm questioning myself, I'm questioning myself.
Yeah.
Because why wouldn't, if I have that much acceptance, why don't I say, what's going on? Like, I just don't want to deal with it anymore, right?
Yes.
And
it
then
keeps
does your
coming back.
sister believe you if you say that's fine?
No, but yeah, because I believe it. It is. Yeah. I mean, if I were just saying that, it'd be one thing. I wouldn't just say that. I just really believe it.
And also she might feel that she has disappointed you.
Could be.
Right. So how can you, as John was saying, I don't obviously see that everybody's trying to be people pleaser because it's a coping mechanism, but in terms of communication and understanding, how can you make her process her disappointment? Yes, it is not your responsibility, and not everybody should be, obviously helping everybody process their emotions. But since you are entangled in this relationship and she keeps apologizing and never stops going to the extreme and annoying you, instead of, kind of emotional reaction, how can you make this person, your sister, understand it's all okay?
I don't know. I think I would just, I would probably put myself in that situation. Like, me, I can't even remember like a podcast invite, and where I put that. So, I mean, how many times, I don't expect you to be OCD like me, like it happens to people. This happens. It happens. Life happens. Mistake. No one's perfect.
Yes. Beth, John, do you guys have any other perspective?
Yeah, for me, I mean, I had a similar situation where we were broken into. I was trying to think about this earlier because I still hold pretty much what got stolen was mostly my jewelry. And it's more like the sentimental pieces
that right.
were stolen that really stick with me. And so it's been a process for me. It's like I can channel my grandfather and say, oh, that person probably needed it more than I did. I mean, I can,
but that's another level, right, Beth? When it's right, like something of value.
There's still that thing that, okay, and it is, in some ways it is like a letting go, right? It's like surrendering and a letting go. And it's, do I really need all this? And of course the answer is no. So, but it has been a process, definitely a process for me. And and again, I mean, I know that people have dealt with such greater things than this, so I don't want to lessen somebody else's, I don't know, the story comes to me about a woman who only son was murdered, and through some remediation with a priest, went to visit the son's murderer in jail. And through this process that this priest, our minister facilitated, I think through over 3 years, got to where not only did she forgive her son's murderer, but when he was released from jail, invited him to live with her. And so to me, that's like this other level,
Another level.
of forgiveness and higher standard. So again, I don't want to I know other people have dealt with much deeper and difficult things. So I certainly don't want to lessen or trivialize what other people have had to go through and the difficulties coming to that.
But Beth, we've all had these situations in our lives. And yeah, I mean, there's always the extreme, but every day we deal with this kind of stuff. And so I think it's very helpful that you say those, like the more trivial or the quote unquote trivial things, because I think everybody can relate to a situation like that or something along those lines.
And I almost feel like in some ways they're little testing grounds or practicing grounds.
Yeah.
So maybe we can forgive our sister for, the break-in or not locking the door. And so then, great, that taught me this and I learned this and that felt this way for me and my emotions, right? And then we'll have the next situation that might be a little bit harder. And so we can dig deeper into some of our other, like you said, Arda, emotional mastery, and work on those things for the next issue and continue to grow.
Yes. And Jon, before we wrap up, do you have anything to add? This is a incredibly beautiful discussion.
Yeah, I just had, I guess, one takeaway that stood out to me, and also a question is, I think it's cool that the curious open-ended questions can work both ways, right? I think I initially thought, okay, this is intended for the person who's trying to forgive. So they say, hey, I felt neglected. I felt not respected in the situation. I'd love to learn more. Can you tell me what happened, right? But then I think you mentioned on the vice versa, if you're the one that is not forgiving, but maybe expected to be forgiven, then you can say things like, hey, I see that you're really sorry. I've already forgiven you, but I'm just curious, what happened, or what are your thoughts here, so that it can go both ways, right? If the consciousness is higher on either side. So that's powerful. And I guess my question for you, Arda, would be, for the person who's asking to be forgiven and they're using curious open-ended questions, what's like the one thing they should keep in mind, or the one tip they should use to not come off also as attacking the other person? Because you might use a curious open-ended question, say, hey, you screwed me. Why did you what went through your mind when you did that? Or why did you do that? And then that might come off as just attacking versus curious.
Yeah.
I know there's energy behind it, but I'm curious if there's any practical tips that you might have to do it, to open up the energy.
Great question, because here's the thing: when you're asking that question, if you still have some grudge in you, you will not be coming across grounded and as a forgiver. You will be accusing them. So the important piece is that you keep your curiosity. If you want to really dive deep and communicate with the other person, you need to have the curiosity. So that curiosity could be, hey, what happened? What was your intention? What is, the reason behind doing this wrongdoing, right? But you are really curiously asking. And then the person says, well, I didn't know about this. Well, I didn't know it was going to offend you, or this and that. And it was a mistake, or this and that. And then I will finish with, how did it feel for you? How did it feel? When you were doing this, how did it feel for you? And that is, I think, you can reach into a deepest understanding of them. And in some situations, the people I coached about forgiveness, the other person, through a variation of this type of question, curious and really getting to the bottom of their psyche, which they may not be aware of, the other person might start crying because they did something unintentional, but something that they were holding inside, and it was a result of some defensive action. right? And
I
when
mean,
you
they might
put
be feel
them
overwhelmingly guilty too, right?
exactly, when you put them, and not as a guilty, like putting them as a guilty wrongdoer, but is it, or charging them of guilt, but it is more like, how did that happen? What, how did it feel for you?
Mm.
How did that happen? Or what were you experiencing when you were doing it?
Yeah.
And
That's
you're
powerful.
bringing their unconscious behavior to their consciousness.
And, one last thing is, and Beth said this last time with one caveat, like if you ask those questions, and I think it's really important to be grounded and
Mm.
non-reactive if you hear something you don't like. And that's hard. It's hard.
Yes. Yes. That's why, great point, Elizabeth. That's why until we process these emotional reactions, until we process these repressed feelings, repressed emotions, the fears, and whatever is going on related to our ego, until we process them, forget about forgiveness.
Mm.
Right? It is such a high energy, and I want to finish it with this what's on page 222, 25. Release of others from their responsibility to act in a certain way according to our expectations, beliefs, or value system. Right? We are releasing others from their responsibility to act according to our expectations. Forgiveness acknowledges your emotional pain, but accepts the wrongdoing of others. So maybe you can accept wrongdoing of others, and also you can walk them through to accept their side of the transaction.
Nicely said
Beautiful.
and written.
Beautiful. Yeah. Powerful.
Thank you. Thank you. And this acceptance is the opposite of judgment.
Mhm. Well,
Beautiful.
I still have some work to do.
Oh, we all do. We all do. These are just the little breadcrumbs for all of us, and I think we can be always reminded of thriving for a better awareness, better consciousness. Awesome. Thank you so much. Again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.